Hi, I'm Bill Allen, and I have the blessing of being the sports director at Channel 5 back in the 60s and the early 70s. My career actually started in high school back in Quincy, Illinois. We had a radio workshop by a teacher by the name of Enid Ireland, and she taught us diction and all that good stuff that we use later on in speaking publicly. We produced half-hour dramas on the local radio station, so I got to know all the local radio guys. And right out of high school, I went to work at WCAZ, Carthage, Illinois, a little daytime station. And about a year later, I volunteered and joined the Army. And guess what? I was a radio broadcast specialist and was a radio announcer for my stint in the Army. Coming back, I got married, and now we have 4 lovely children. But when I came back, went back to the old station, and about a year later, I decided that if I was going to go anyplace, the dream always is that you'll be a radio station owner someday. So I thought I'd better get more education, and I went to college. Started at Western Illinois in Macomb and finished up at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, where I got a degree with a major in radio and television from the school. And then started out on my career. I really got into sportscasting in college, and my first job was in Binghamton, New York, WNBF, which lasted through the summer. And then I got an opportunity to go to WANE in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where I was the sports director there for a couple of years, and also the booth announcer. And the management of the station wanted a booth announcer more than they did a sports director, so I got back into radio and boned up on my play-by-play in Kenosha, Wisconsin, WLIP. But it's funny how things work. Somebody who was a friend of Richard Hickox, who was the news director at WISH in Indianapolis, he had moved down to Oklahoma City, and lo and behold, they were needing a sports director, and my name was given to him. I auditioned and came down, and that's where I started doing my sportscasting at KOCO-TV in the old building over on 63rd in Portland. I did that through the late 60s and early 70s. It was an amazing opportunity. I really look back at it now and think that I was blessed of the timing of when I was there, because sportscasting back then with ABC turned out to be a real opportunity, in that ABC at that time had the rights to all the college football games. It's not like it is now, where you have a football game every Saturday on just about every channel. But so if the local games were sold out, and OU was most of the time always sold out, and it wouldn't interfere with the gate, we had the opportunity to, and it wasn't on the national network, we had the opportunity to do it locally. And so I was blessed with my first appearance on KOCO-TV. I did the color, and Red Barber, who was at the twilight of his career, but it was really quite an honor to work with him. My first experience on KOCO back in, I believe it was '66. The next year I got the opportunity to do the OU-OSU game myself. In fact, during the course of my career at Channel 5, I probably did the play-by-play on a local broadcast for OU and OSU maybe 6 or 7 times. Some really, really great games, and a tremendous opportunity for me. In fact, the first time I did a game from the Cotton Bowl with OU Texas, I thought to myself, in the vain way you use things that happen when you're young, I thought, Bill, you finally made it. You're at a top 50 station market. And here you are in the Cotton Bowl calling an OU Texas game. And I did that probably, I think, 3 or 4 times. So it was just really a tremendous blessing. Probably one of the more interesting places that I did play-by-play was OU and Notre Dame. And I think it was probably around 70, I can't remember the dates anymore. But the amazing thing of that particular venture was that we were in a press box that wasn't a whole lot wider than this. Our broadcast booth was probably maybe 7 or 8 feet across and about 4 or 5 feet deep. And we had 4 people snuggled in there. But the old adage that if you look out the press box window to the left, you see a statue up there saying touchdown is good. And if you look out to the right, and the extra point is good also. And that is true. Those statues are both there. And the press box is much, much better now. One of the other things that I was able to do at KOCO was I had the privilege of working with a gentleman that I have had, still have the utmost respect for, and that is Abe Lemons. We did the Abe Lemon Show live on our station, and Abe was a very, very entertaining and humorous man. And one of the first shows that we did, I turned over to Abe and I said, Abe, you know, you take your team each year to some exotic places. How's that worked out? And he said, well, 2 years ago we went to Hawaii for the Rainbow Classic, and they made me an honorary Hawaiian. And last year we went to Alaska to the shootout, and they made me an honorary Eskimo. And then he paused and had a puzzled look on his face, and he says, I really don't know what's going to happen this year. We're going to the Virgin Islands. And that's the way Abe was. He cracked jokes like that all the time. He had celebrities on. I remember doing a show with Abe and Hank Iba. Talk about being humble as a kind of a yearling sportscaster. It was quite an interesting thing. But I've enjoyed all of my stay at Channel 5 because I got to watch my boys wrestle and become state champions and state runner-ups and 2-time All-Americans for each one of them at Central State University. And that kind of got me involved in, even after I was off the air, I was still next to the microphone. And I did the announcing for the Broncos at Central State for several years. And I also did announcing for Mustang High School, where my boys finished up their schooling. And in fact, just a couple of years ago, I finally retired. I did the football play-by-play and the wrestling play-by-play for over 38 years at Mustang High School. Some of the interesting things that have happened to me while sportscasting for Channel 5, in the play-by-play story, I did an OU-OSU game, I think it was about 69, but I lose dates. But anyhow, it was a back and forth game. It was an exciting game. OU would go ahead, and then OSU would come back, and they'd go ahead. And it went like that all afternoon. And the final score wound up like 27-28 or 26-27, a one-point game. And when I got back to the station, I thought, wow, we had really had a great game, and I did a good job play-by-play. Patted myself on the back all the way, like you do. And I walked into the front door, and the receptionist says, what in the world did you do today? And I said, what do you mean, what did I do? I've been up to OSU, and I did the ball game. She says, well, I know that, but what were you saying? I said, well, I don't know. What are you talking about? She started to laugh. She says, every time that OU would go ahead, my switchboard would light up. and everybody would say, "Your announcer is prejudiced against OSU." And then, and for time that OSU would go ahead, it's the same thing. Switchboard would light up, and "Your announcer is prejudiced against the Sooners," and back and forth all day long. And it turns out that we had 350 protests or complaints about my play-by-play simply on the fact that the announcer was causing the game to go the way it was. It's just one of those things. It was the first lesson that I learned here in Oklahoma, is that it's hard to please OU and OSU fans at the same time in a game. And so I kept that in mind. But I had a pleasant time competing against a legend in broadcasting here, Bob Berry Sr. And Bob and I would talk all the time about the games. And I don't know if you remember it, but I do. When I was on the air, and I'd tell him that we're going to broadcast the game live on Saturday, and Bob on his channel would say, "Now be sure, folks, when you tune in the TV, to turn the sound down and listen to my play-by-play on radio." So, you know, it's a friendly competition, but it was enjoyable. And speaking of Bob, he is a legend, but he also was very funny, and he had one joke that was his favorite joke he liked to tell. And in fact, I think they even told it at his funeral. But it was an Aggie joke, but he said Texas Aggies because at that time I think he was doing the OSU games, and he said, "You know, did you hear about the tragedy the Aggies had? 3 of their members got killed, their football team. Their vehicle ran into a lake and submerged, and 2 people rolled down the windows and got out that way, but the 3 in the back couldn't get the tailgate down." So, and that was Bob's humor. I also remember working with Count Gregor. When I first came, Count Gregor and I became good friends, and later on I started working for the Count when he was a sales manager at Channel 43 and also at Channel 25 after my broadcast career, where I went on to do other things. Ho-Ho and Pokey. There's so many interesting folks that you run into in this business. Some of the names that you don't are not around anymore. Jerry Park, for instance, and his touching his nose. He started that here in Oklahoma. He was bound and determined he was going to do something that people would remember him by. One of the surprising things about sportscasting nowadays, I'm really happy that I was able to do it when I did it, because the opportunities to do play-by-play and some of the studio stuff was just terribly interesting. And at Channel 5 at that time, we had no sports department. I was the first sports director that Channel 5 had, and I used the photographers from the news department. Eventually, we got established enough that they hired a photographer for me, but for a long time I used Bill Collard as my photographer, and Bill and I would go all around and do all kinds of things. And one of the interesting things that I really am proud of is we covered the National Finals Rodeo when was at the arena, and on this particular night, back in those days, we didn't have DVDs, we didn't have the fast automatic video capabilities that they have now with computers. We would have to shoot film, and sometimes it was on what they called the old Mickey Mouse camera, which was a winder up. It'd go about 30 seconds, and then you have to wind it up again, shoot another scene. But we'd bring the film back, and then I edit it, wait for it to develop, write my story, edit the film, and so forth, and go on. Well, this particular night, later on in the arena, Freckles Brown was going to ride Tornado. And so I left Bill Collard down at the arena just on the outside chance that Freckles was able to ride Tornado for his first time ever to be ridden. And lo and behold, he did, and we were the only station that had it on the air. Those kinds of things stand out, and it's things that you realize that you kind of made good decisions, and things worked out very good. But nowadays, everybody would have still been there, because with the instantaneous, you don't have to run film back, you don't have to wait for it to develop, and you don't have to sit and edit your story to match. And talking about editing, right now we have it on digital. Back in the days when I was on TV, our video was with 2-inch tape, and you had to cut it and splice it just like you do audio tape back in the old radio days. And then when that splice would go through the machine, you had to cover it with what they called a cutaway shot. So I do envy the people of the modern days who get the live shots off of satellites all the time and do everything. It's the technology that we have today is just amazing. That part I would like to do all over again. I think it would be a blast to do things live. So as I look back, my career has been a true blessing, and I probably wouldn't change anything. I hope that maybe some of you remember me, and I hope I haven't bored the rest of you too much with my ranting about my profile, my career. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope to see you down the road sometime.